Hello, this is Michael Tyler welcoming you to another free Vectric project of the month. This project is compatible with both VCarve and Aspire software. It features two-sided machining as well as single-sided machining in the file layouts. As you can see, it's an attractive box made to resemble an old stack of books. The lid itself resembles a slightly oversized book and is intentionally made to overhang the books that are stacked underneath to give it a more realistic appearance and to provide a convenient lip when raising the lid. The finish techniques I used for this project is a multi-step glaze finish created with standard acrylic craft paints. This project is a little more involved in some respects, as it does require the use of other shop tools in addition to your CNC. For example, the back corners of the box and the lid need to be cut at 45-degree angles using a chop saw or a table saw. And you can use hand chisels or a small router to create the hinge mortises depending upon the type of box hinges you choose to use. I've included the Vectric project files in both horizontal and vertical orientation. The illustrated step-by-step PDF instructions are also provided along with this video to help you along while making the project. The lid of the book box was intentionally left plain. However, this does lend itself to customization on your part if you'd like to create a nice VCarve design on the lid. To receive this free project, just log in to your Vectric customer V&Co account to download all the files. Have fun making this project and please post photos of your version at the Vectric user forum and your social media accounts. And don't forget to subscribe to this video channel so you'll be notified when new free Vectric projects are posted. That way you won't miss a thing. Now, on with the rest of this project video. Okay, we've got side one finished and we need to flip this over, and these dowel guides here, the alignment holes were drilled all the way through the board and into the spoil board. And then I use a couple of these 1/4-inch dowel pins. I got a couple of them here. I've just cut them a little bit shorter than what they normally are, but I'll insert those into the holes in the spoil board so when we flip this way, then it'll align perfectly. I've sanded all these parts. They're not final sanded, but they're sanded good enough for this next step. And what we're going to do is to match these up, make sure that these are matching with the design on the front and matched up with each other to the back side and the other side too, of course. If you have these, let's say upside down, you can see those aren't going to match. So got to be sure that these match up. And then one thing I do to help remind me not to get these out of order, you see here I've marked, this is the flat side that goes here, and I've also put an arrow pointing up so I know that this side goes up. And I've done that on both of these sides here, and also I wrote down here on this back piece, I just wrote the word base. Okay, so I just want to mark these as a reminder to me when I get to the chop saw which direction these miters go. So I know I'm going to cut a miter this direction, and for this to match up here, I need to go with this direction. And same here, I'm going to mark this direction and mark this direction. So when I get to the miter saw, then I won't get mixed up which direction that miter is supposed to go. So once these are cut, then this corner will match up with this corner match up with this corner. And we're going to do the same thing with the lid. Bring that over here. So I've got my lid parts. The lid's upside down, and the narrowest area is the front of the lid. There's the top, the plain top. And then we've got this piece here, which has got the little recess there. Goes on top of that shallower dado. And then we've got our side pieces here. Now you'll notice that this has a rounded raised area, and then this is just a sharp flat. The sharp flat part goes down. Same with this side. Goes down. There's really only one way to fit this together, as long as you remember to have that flat side going down to the underside of the lid. And then same here, we've got the flat part and the ridge that goes down. So I need to mark the miters for this, miter direction for this too. So we'll go ahead and mark that. Okay, so these marks will just help remind me to make sure that I've got the miter cuts going the right direction. I'm at the chop saw now to cut these miters. As you can see, I've prepped these with some masking tape underneath there just to minimize any blowout from the cuts. And I'm using these guides to let me know where the angle is for each one of these miter cuts. So I've set up a stop block so that when I push this square edge against the stop block, this blade will come down and it will just kiss this corner right here and cut a perfect 45-degree miter even with that corner. So the key here is these are already at the exact length. So you only got one chance at this. You need to make sure that when you cut this miter that it doesn't alter the length in any way. So you just want that blade to just kiss that corner, that highest corner. So that's how you arrange your stop block, is make sure that you're lining that blade up at that highest corner. Once you have the stop block set up, then it doesn't matter because you've already got you don't have to worry about the position. You've already got the stop block there to take care of that. Okay, so I'll go ahead and cut the parts, the miters for the lid, and then we'll move on and cut the miters for the box. Okay, now we'll cut the box parts. Again, I've put some masking tape on there just to make sure that I minimize any amount of blowout from the miter cut. I've removed all the masking tape from the miter cutting at the chop saw, and I've got a piece of board here that would become the box bottom. Now, if I cut these correctly and kept the lengths the same, then the box bottom is going to measure 5 13/16 inches wide by 8 1/4 inches long. But just to verify that, make sure I cut these correctly, I'm going to go ahead and tape these together and get a a sharp pencil and mark on the board there just to confirm that my dimensions are correct, 5 13/16 by 8 1/4. Okay, that's right on, 8 1/4. By 5 13/16. So I know that these miters were cut correctly, and so I've got that. I'll just cut this out on the table saw. Now, if you wanted to, if you confirm those dimensions are correct, you could create just a simple triangle or a simple rectangle in VCarve and cut out this bottom piece on the CNC machine, 8 1/4 by 5 13/16. Before we get to the glue up stage for the box and the lid, I want to add a little bit of detail to this lid here. You notice the book ends has kind of a curved surface, and the top of the lid, which actually represents the other book end of this top book, these are straight, so these need to be rounded off. Now, not the front one. The front you leave square, no rounding off in the front, but the two sides and the back need to be rounded off. So how I'm going to do is I'm just going to use some coarse sandpaper to begin with and sand just a little chamfer across both those areas there. And then also on the top part, I'll just continue that round over. Now you can wait on rounding over this top part until after the glue up, but you definitely need to round off these edges where these are going to be glued on, because after that's glued on, it's going to be really difficult to contour that. Okay, so we'll start with a coarse grit. I'll go down to more of a medium grit, and then we'll finish up that rounding over with a 220. All right, I got the edges rounded over on the two sides and along the back. And like I said before, this is left flat. You don't want to round the front off at all. So ready for glue up. I got a couple paint brushes and a glue brush, and I like to use the paint brushes. I seem to have a little more control, but I've got the glue brush there just in case I change my mind. Okay, we'll just apply a little glue here. And we'll brush that out. I don't want to get glue out too far along these side and back edges, because I don't want the squeeze out to come out around those book edges. I'll put a little bit of glue here. And just make sure that you have this flat side down. Looks like we're okay there. Okay, that looks pretty good. And what I'll do is I'll just tape this up and use the tape as a clamp and just keep everything together while the glue dries. The box and the lid have been sanded after assembly, just sanding overall. The final sanding will take place a little bit later after I apply a 50-50 mixture of this Zinsser Bullseye Seal Coat. It's 100% wax-free shellac is all it is, and I'm mixing that 1 part to 1 part with denatured alcohol. So 1 part denatured alcohol, 1 part the Zinsser shellac, and that gives me a really good sealer, as well as when it dries. This is a very thin coat. When it dries, it will raise any fuzzies and stiffen them up, so it'll be easier to remove during the final sanding stage. So I'm just going to apply a light coat over both pieces and then sand it, and then see if I need another coat before I apply the final finish. I applied 2 coats of the thin sanding sealer and sanded everything up. So now I'm ready to install the hinges. Now you can use whatever hinges that you like, but I've chosen these box hinges. They're 2 inches long by 1 inch when they're open. So that'll be a good size for this box. So what I'm going to do is I'll cut a couple mortises to fit these hinges in the flat edge of the top of this base. And this hinge pin portion, I'm going to recess these so that when the hinge is closed, it'll be flush with the top, and also this hinge pin area will line up with the faux book edge here. So that should give a good appearance for that hinge. All right, so let's open up these hinges and go ahead and get started with the hinge installation. I'm just going to use a container here to hold all the screws and hinges there. Okay, I need to mark the location of these hinges, so I'm just going to lay this out a little bit, see what looks right. Okay, let's see, that's about, okay, let's go in 1 1/4 inches. Okay, 1 1/4 inches from that side. 1 1/4 inches on that side. So that gives me the outside edge of the hinges. Now, I mentioned earlier that this hinge pin I want to sort of merge into this book end edge or book edge. So I need to bring that hinge in as much as possible. So I'm just going to eyeball that. See if I can get that aligned nicely. There we go. And I'll just trace that around there. And I'll do the same thing for the other side. Okay, I've turned this around after marking for the position of the hinges, and I just need to find out how deep I need to cut these 2 mortises for the hinge. So I've closed the hinge to the point where it's at its close point when it's mounted on the box, and I'm just going to measure how deep that needs to go. So I don't know if you can see that there or not. So I can get that close and in focus for you. So it appears to be about 3/16 of an inch is how deep I need to go for these mortises. I might go a little bit shy of that at first, just to do a test fit and see if that's all right, and then just massage that depth a little bit more to get a good fit and make sure that this ends up flat at the top surface here. All right, I've gone ahead and marked the depth of the cut, the 3/16 of an inch, and I'm going to do that just a little bit shy, just to be on the safe side, and I can make that a little deeper if I need to. Now, if I knew that everybody was using the exact same hinge that I'm using with the exact same dimensions, I could have incorporated a couple pocket cuts here in the design itself before this piece was cut out with a profile cut. But since I don't know what hinge you're going to use or what dimensions they are, I wasn't able to do that. However, you can if you want to. If you know the dimensions and you're careful with incorporating those dimensions in here, you can go ahead and incorporate that as part of the design. Of course, you'll have rounded fillets due to the roundness of the bit, but you can clean that up with, just a chisel or maybe even a straight edge razor blade. There's another way, and one that I use fairly often, is I have a router attachment for my rotary tool, my Dremel rotary tool. So I can put a bit in there, and it's got guides in that rotary attachment, and I can cut these out using that rotary tool with that router attachment. So 3 ways to do it: incorporate the mortise into your design, cut it out by hand with chisels, or the old-fashioned way, or you can use a router attachment with a rotary tool. Both mortises have been cut and tweaked to the right depth. And one thing that I like to do is to create a little spacer so that when I close this hinge, it makes it so that these plates, the hinge plates, are parallel to each other. Gives me a better gauge for that depth. And all I'm using for that is I just cut up a business card into small pieces and wrap a piece of masking tape around them when I've got the right thickness for the spacer. I just put that spacer in the hinge there, and it gives me that parallel plates there, so I can get a really good accurate depth on the hinges. So the next step, we're going to go ahead and screw these hinges down into the box bottom, and then we'll attach the hinges to the lid. The hinges are all installed and look good. Everything's lined up. But before finishing, we do need to take these hinges out. Now, one thing I'll mention is probably, since these are not the type of hinge that has an auto stop, I'll probably put in a chain of some kind to prevent this lid from going all the way back. I've got some board stacked up here with a towel on it to protect that lid just during this disassembly of the hinges. We'll set these aside and then we'll apply our finish. Okay, we're at step 1 for the finishing process. And for my box, I've decided to go ahead and apply some glazing techniques to this project. So I'm going to seal the wood further. It's already had a couple coats of that thin seal coat for the sanding purposes, but I'm going to apply several light coats of this gloss crystal clear overall, inside and out. And then I'll follow that up with some of this Krylon flat crystal clear. The flat is just to take the sheen down so that the paint and stains, whatever I decide to use for the glazing technique, will have something to bite onto. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the Krylon gloss. And I'm just going to apply a few light coats just to seal that wood in preparation for the glazing process. Okay, we're ready to apply the glazing colors. I'm just using acrylic craft paint. I've picked out several colors here. Some I might use, some I might not use. But I'm going to apply these acrylic craft paints just like a stain, but in a way selectively. So here we go. Starting with the easy one first, that's the top. I'm just going to dip this rag into a little bit of water here and just thin that a little bit. And I'll start with the bottom. Okay, I'm going to let that sit and dry just a little bit before I continue on. Okay, we'll set that aside to dry, and we'll start with the box bottom here in a few minutes. The acrylic paints are dry now, and the next step is to seal these paints before the final glazing is applied. I'm going to use the Krylon clear gloss and also follow it up with the Krylon flat just to give a little bite for that final dark glazing to be applied to. I've sealed the paint with the Krylon and gave it a few light coats of gloss and then finished up with flat. So the next step is I've just gathered a bunch of brushes. I've got a couple of these on purpose not cleaned properly brushes in case I need those to have a little stiffer bristle to work out some of these glaze points here. So I'm going to go ahead and use some acrylic dark brown paint. This one's called Burnt Umber. I'll just squirt some out here on a plate. And I go ahead and brush this on. Now, the idea is I'm going to brush on that brown paint and leave it in these crevices to delineate how these books are stacked, but I want to wipe out most of it along the book pages edges. So this will give this sort of an antique book appearance. Okay, I think I'll go ahead and start with the front first. Now, I did not dilute this paint. And I'll just wipe off most of this paint here. And again, I'm leaving a lot of this paint in the crevices there. I'll just put a little bit more in here. I missed a spot. Okay, I don't want to stain this part yet, so I'm just going to dip a rag in some water and remove that paint before it dries. And you see, this is one reason why I like to seal that really well before I do this process, because if I slop some over somewhere I don't want it, I can wipe it off easily with a little water and a rag. Okay, I'm going to let that just dry just a bit before I continue on with the other three sides. Okay, I've let that set for, maybe 3 or 4 minutes is all, just a short period of time. And so I'll show you how just doing this one side, the other two sides are the same. So I won't bore you with that. I'll just do these two sides. Okay. And again, we'll just wipe this off here. And get a little bit more in that crevice right there. Okay, I'm just going to switch rags here for a second. Get a nice clean one. And I'll take one of my stiff brushes here and just brush that excess out of these crevices. And again, I don't want to stain the top or the bottom yet, so I'm just going to dip this in the water and remove that paint that I don't want to get on there just yet. We'll do that separately. Okay. So So you can see how that's given a really nice antique effect there. Just brush some of this out again. Now if you want more of this removed, you can always dampen the rag and get more of that out of there if you want to. And I'll dig out a little bit more of this from the crevices. Now in between here, I want it, fairly dark, so I'm going to take a small brush and just paint some of that brown in there. Just give a little bit more separation. And wipe off the slop. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. And let that set for just a couple of minutes or so and continue on with the rest of it, and then I'll get back to you. Okay, I've got all three of the sides and the front done, and so I'm just going to antique this top portion a little bit here. I'm just rubbing on some of that brown paint to give it that old sort of rustic antique look. Okay, that looks pretty good. Just look at the bottom here. I don't know if I'll even need to do the bottom, but let's take a look. No, I think I can go ahead and leave that bottom just like that. I'm probably going to put a piece of self-adhesive cork on the bottom of this anyway, or maybe some 4 pads for feet to keep it off a surface. Okay, I'm going to let that dry, and then I'll bring over the lid and we'll do that too. Okay, the glazing is finished, and now we're ready to apply the final clear coats. So I'm going to go ahead and start with my standard gloss crystal clear Krylon, and then I'll probably finish that up with a satin Krylon. The final clear coats are all dry, so I'm just reinstalling the hinges for the box. And that just about completes this project. A couple of comments or ending notes here. You may want to leave this natural like I have, or you might want to line it with felt or maybe some flocking, something like that, or maybe even a separate tray, a lift out tray of some kind. It's up to you. These are not stop hinges, so if you don't have stop hinges, you could put a small length of chain here and here. Just be sure that whatever screws you use are short enough to where they don't poke through on the other side of the box here. And then for the bottom, you could put maybe some silicone feet or some self-stick cork. That's probably what I'm going to do. And I'll just turn this box around so you can see this overhang. This just gives a little bit of randomness to this book stack, and also is functional as a little bit of a lip to help you lift that lid up when you want to open the box. So I hope you've enjoyed the project. Again, you can download all the files, PDF instructions, and so on from your V&Co account at Vectric. And if you make one of these, please do post some photos of it so we can see your version. And if you're so inclined, you decide to make some sort of a decorative design for this plain box top, we'd love to see that as well. So I hope you've enjoyed this project. Don't forget to subscribe to this video channel to get notified of all the future free Vectric projects of the month. This is Michael Tyler. I'll talk to you next month. Happy carving!